Hello and welcome to Yells at Cloud. This week brought to you by the generally available service that you couldn't use. My name is Gunnar and this is episode 1. Joining me today, Danielle Heberling, AJ Steibenberg, Matthew Bonig, and Chris Williams. Welcome all to the first episode of a show we've been threatening to make now for quite a while. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Gunnar, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great. All right, we have a lot to get through, and I want to start with something that AJ has been waiting to yell about, I think. AJ, Lambda MicroVMs. Tell me what happened and whether I should care.
Thanks, Gunnar. I'll try to land the plane here. I'm actually really excited about Lambda MicroVMs from a technological standpoint. It's, I think, their most creative compute product that the serverless team has offered it in years. It's the kind of thing that I've been begging them to make for a long time. What it is a hosted version of Lambda's underlying VM technology called Firecracker. And it's done in a way that is not tied to like a function response lifecycle like you get for Lambda, and is even more flexible than something like Fargate. So they give you, an actual running instance that you can connect to, you can send data to, you can get responses back in like an interactive session, and you can also suspend it and resume it as necessary. There's a couple of very cool aspects of Lambda that they applied to micro VMs. I think the first is, when you deploy one, it will actually snapshot the running micro VM so that when the function or when the micro VM is invoked for the first time, it is restored. It's much faster to boot than it would be like on EC2 or Fargate, where you have to wait for the actual virtual machine to fully boot. In this case, it just restores the contents of RAM right back to the running machine. So it comes up in milliseconds. It's a very cool application of Firecracker snapshot technology to a product. What I think it's like particularly useful for, and Lambda's been very vocal about it underpinning a couple of other services. I think the biggest one that they talk about is Bedrock Agent Core, where I start to get into some of the complaints is around their pricing model. And while I think the technology is super cool, the pricing model is done in such a way where they give their own teams preferential pricing over other customers. So if you use Bedrock Agent Core, again, built on top of micro VMs, you will pay only for the active time where your task is scheduled on the CPU itself. So there's inside of a Linux system, there's a directory called proc. It measures, it holds data about metadata about different processes being scheduled and running on your machine, including what file descriptors are open and what the task is doing, if it's scheduled or not. So you only pay in the version of Bedrock Agent Core, you only pay for the time when the CPU schedules your task. And if anyone here has built AI agents or is using them, you know that a lot of your time is spent waiting on I/O. So you're waiting on either like LLM inference, you're waiting for your AI provider to respond to like a text query and then start a new turn of your agent, or you're waiting for some data to be loaded or stored from a data store or pulled somewhere. So the actual active CPU time is quite small. And actually, I looked at a couple of traces from a production service that I've been using at Datadog, and it's like 0.5% of the time is active CPU time, and the rest of it's dominated by either waiting for the actions that this agent takes, right? It like takes an action, it waits for that to respond, and then it gets a response back, or it's waiting for the LLM. So I think like, if you're doing pure agent development, this is probably not the product for you. That's my take on this. If you're doing something like they call it, like if you want to run, Spark jobs or like glue-like workloads where you have some big data compaction or data analytic request that comes through every so often, you want kind of really large scale for a short period of time and you want to burst it and then you want to suspend it after a bit, that's great. There are some very cool and very interesting aspects of this that are neat. So they will automatically suspend the task for you if it doesn't get any requests. There's like some interesting technological limitations. It's only like layer 7, so HTTP only. So you don't have like a raw TCP connection, so you can't host Redis, for example. Myself and a couple other AWS heroes, Aiden Steele, try to like deploy Kubernetes on top of this, which is kind of neat. And you can do, TCP over WebSockets and a bunch of other little fun hacks. So there's like SSH on top of these. So it's cool. You get a real running machine. I do like that. I do think it's a very cool dimension to serverless that we haven't had before. They also have a burstable CPU. So you provision low. So say your task, when it runs, you need 4 vCPUs, but when it's not running, you want it to be around but much less. So they'll automatically let you provision for 1 vCPU and then burst up to 4x your capacity, which I do think is like another cool aspect of this. It does change the pricing, but fundamentally, I still think it's like roughly 2.5 to 3.5x more expensive than like a Fargate. So I think if you're on a smaller scale, it's great. Luke, another AWS hero, replaced his GitHub Action Runner fleet with microVMs, which is like another cool use case. I did a little bit of napkin math, and my gut check is basically after you have like 3 or 4 developers working and you're doing enough jobs, it probably makes more sense to build something on like more stateful computer or use another product that's designed for that. But I think at low scale, it's pretty interesting, and I'm mostly excited that it's a very, very different take on something we've seen from serverless. They're vocally departing from the what serverless is supposed to be in spirit, and they're experimenting with it, which I'm very encouraged about. I just really think it would be a better product if they would be able to extend the per the active CPU pricing only model to microVMs, because then you could throw a lot of these out there, let them suspend no matter what, and then when you're waiting for idle time or you're waiting for LLMs, you're not getting charged. And I think that just makes more sense. It's more reflective of the underlying cost to AWS. And it's proven out by the fact that they bill their own teams based on that. You can buy Bedrock Agent Core and only pay when the CPU is actually scheduling your task versus what you would do if you actually try to build that yourself on top of microVMs. I think that right now customers probably don't care so much. People are in a trying it out phase, but I do think what you're going to see with time is people will have more and more specific workloads they want to run inside of AI agents, and that will necessitate a move from something like Agent Core or other competitor, platforms that are agent builders, to something where they have a little bit more control over the compute. They'll discover microVMs, and I think the first thing they're going to realize is like their costs are going to explode if they just kept running what they were doing, and they'll have to kind of rebuild for that. So anyway, it is a very cool idea. I do like it. I've had a lot of fun playing with it. You can, we're still in the phase where interesting projects are being contorted to run on those things like we had for a long time in Lambda. So I enjoy that very much. But yeah, that's my take. I think it's a cool service. I think it's kind of hamstrung by the pricing model. I do think eventually they'll come around on it, or they'll launch like a flavor of this that is, builds on active CPU time. Lots of other providers already do that, right? Vercel does that. Cloudflare workers do that. Notably, Cloudflare sandboxes don't. That runs on their containers product, which it does bill, by like the hour. But otherwise, I think for the most part, it's a really cool service. You should check it out.
But in the state that it is in right now, who is it for then?
I have no idea. That's the part that I cannot parse, is when I ask about it, and you read their blog, it's like, okay, this is for, you're going to build an agent. I'm like, great, but Bedrock Agent Core is that already, and it has the pricing model that I want. And again, I have the data. Like I have these agents that I'm running that I can show you. 95 or 99.5% of the time is spent off CPU. It's blocked on IO or something else, right? So I would never touch this. You're just going to waste a bunch of idle cores. I don't know. I would imagine this works great if you have like low density Flink jobs, for example. Flink is a data processing system for Kafka, very popular. And if you don't have large clusters of stateful Flink compute, this makes a lot of sense. And you really do have those like elastic needs. I think that can make a lot of sense. GitHub runners are probably another good example. Luke is doing this for his, I think it's a solo project, small, like not, he doesn't have an army of staff as far as I know, working on the AWS newsfeed that he's built. So I think that also makes a lot of sense. There's a couple of areas where I think it'd be cool. I can also see a couple of niche use cases where if they allow you to do something like TCP, where you could host like an in-memory cache to like coordinate Lambda functions. There's like very cool things that you couldn't do on Lambda that you could now do. There was a project that built what is now a version of like the multi-concurrent Lambda managed instances. They built that on top of Fargate with Lambda. So they had like a Fargate coordinator that could multiplex requests onto sandboxes inside of Lambda. So you have like, don't waste those CPU cores. I think that was neat. That's something you could do with this too. Anything you need, consistency with a capital C, anything you need coordination, this could be useful if you're doing some Lambda work. So I don't have a killer use case for it though, because it's certainly not AI agents that are going to spend most of their time waiting for inference. If your AI agent does something like a little bit of inference and then a ton of data processing, that might make more sense. And then the burst capacities kind of work out on paper. What that is, I mean, we're in a world right now where people are overbuilding all kinds of things for a customer that they're hoping is going to arrive at some point. I don't know. And the clarity of responses I've heard from people is like, this is kind of something they're using to underpin their own products, and it made sense to like publish, and I think it does, and maybe we'll find that user, maybe we will, but I don't know who it is now. It's not me.
No, and the isolation thing in itself isn't worth 4 times the price.
Yeah, I'm not, I do think that's like another target, and we can kind of talk about that. There's like do you want to run untrusted code that your users submit? Right. That's like the Vercel question is always out there. And there are a few answers to that. Lambda famously backed Vercel for a very long time. They're now running on their own to some extent. I don't know what degree, but they're very, very open about it on social media, that they're running their own hosted Firecracker that I know powers all of their builds. And it sounds like some of their invocations and some other stuff. But, beyond, like, if people aren't uploading, JavaScript code to you and you're executing it, it's probably not for you. There's a question of like, what if my AI agent writes some code? I think that's what like Bedrock Agent Core is also pretty good at doing. The agent can write code and kind of run there to some extent. You can also do very similar things on workers, or like I said, Vercel has a sandbox product that does that too. If it's only your agent, you could probably get away with doing that on Firecracker. I'm sorry, on Fargate, because you don't care if there's some element of escaping or polluting within that cluster because it's all your AI agents. If you really don't trust that code, then you're probably going to use a VM anyway, especially if you don't care about the other aspects. So I'm sure there's some companies that have this like killer intersection of they need snapshotable, restorable workspaces. I do think it's kind of cool if you're going to have like a dev workspace that you connect to only a couple of hours a day and you want it to be there. That's fine. But again, like, companies that are at that stage where they're like, everyone's going to work on a dev box, probably have enough compute where you're going to run those statefully, and then you can recharge your own machine, right? Like there's like, that does seem like a lot of work, but it really just isn't. Those are well understood paths right now where you can do that. So I'm really not sure. I'm excited to see like the killer use case. I've seen a couple blog posts. I've tried it a lot. I somehow racked up like $100 bill on it already, and I'm not exactly sure for what. But it is, it is cool. I will certainly say, in the spirit of being constructive, it's like the most fun I've had with a Lambda branded product in a long time, by far. So, and I hope you get the chance to play with it, because it's just neat. It's like, it feels like the first time I tried Heroku to an extent. But I just don't know where it lands in 2026.
Yeah. Danielle, is this a problem or a solution to a problem that you have, or are you also struggling to find the use case for it?
Yeah, for me, mostly like it looks awesome, but yeah, still struggling to find the use case. I also question how much it makes sense to have under the Lambda brand. But yeah, I may consider using it for like lower, kind of like how Luke did it with his runners, because I use code build runners for GitHub, and occasionally it takes some time to start up. So that alone would be a big win, assuming my company's cool with eating the cost. But
yeah, there are some cool aspects of that, right? Like you can have, if you have like hundreds of dependencies that you build ahead of time and your runners are building them over and over again, and it's hard to cache, like great snapshots solve a lot of that, right? But that's not, those are also well understood things within GitHub. Like GitHub has cache, runner caches. GitHub has, you can cache layers of your container image also. That's like part of the OCI spec. So it's like, it does solve a lot of problems that you could theoretically have, but I think there's already a lot of like solutions to them too. So I'm not sure how that plays.
Yeah. Like for my company, we need to be FedRAMP certified because we build stuff for like state governments. So yeah, like all self-hosted runners all the way. And like, yeah, that's kind of the main reason why that stands out to me, of like, oh, this is another option aside from, vanilla ECS Fargate versus code build. So I haven't checked it out yet, but wanting to experiment with it for sure.
Yeah. The pricing page is a history in itself as well. Just understanding how this is priced compared to other type of Lambda functions, for instance, took me a while, but got there eventually, I think. Speaking of things that perhaps requires a support ticket almost to understand, we have CloudFormation Express Mode.
Yeah, so CloudFormation has been doing a lot over the last year or two to try to speed things up and to make the experience a little bit better for developers trying to build ephemeral environments or local environments. And this latest one is frustrating to me because they're sitting here claiming like you speed up infrastructure deployments by 4 times by doing this new Express Mode. So the basis behind Express Mode is that they're no longer going to wait for resource stabilization before they say that the stack is complete or a resource is complete. That's not a finished deployment. Like, they're just cheating at that point. They're not actually, the resources aren't available. You can't hit them. You can't use them because they haven't stabilized, because they're not available yet. So to me, it's just pushing the problem down the road a little bit. So now if I'm going to use this, so let's say I'm using this for an ephemeral environment. So I go and I do the deployment, and rather than waiting for half an hour for an RDS instance to spin up, it gets done in 5 minutes. So then my CI process goes, hey, you're all done. And the stack is done running and everything. And I go to try to hit stuff and nothing is working. So I have to actually sit there and now the ownership is on me. Understand, is the resource actually available and workable? So if you're talking about a fairly minor change, something that is very fast to go through, then this mode doesn't really buy you anything. And if you're talking about a resource that takes a long time to provision, a long time to stabilize, like a CloudFront distribution, a Lambda attached to a VPC, an RDS instance, even an EC2 instance, now it's on me to not understand if that thing is up and so it doesn't actually buy me anything. Now this actually puts more operational overhead on me to care about. And I don't understand who this is for. They say, like, very specifically for developers and for AI agents. Well, for an AI agent, I could kind of see it, because giving the ownership to the AI agent to understand if something is available is kind of low cost. But from a development standpoint, this doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, so I have that ephemeral environment. I can go run some tests against it, some end-to-end testing. Oh, no, I can't, because RDS is still spinning up. And now I have to poll to see when that RDS instance is actually available, or when the connection errors go away, or when whatever. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't know who this is for. I don't think this is something they should have released. And I think this breaks a fundamental contract that has been in CloudFormation since day one, which is if the stack is done, the resources are available. And so this should come with a huge warning label to people about, hey, don't use this unless you just don't care about doing any sort of access to that resource once it's done. Once it's complete, if you will.
So basically, it reports done before it's actually done. That's the whole thing here.
Mm-hmm. Is there a
it lies to you?
Is there a way to, like, I mean, it sounds silly, but, like, bake in a depends on hook at the end? I mean, but that's what the original version of CloudFormation does. So if you don't use that, then you don't have to do a workaround. Okay, yeah, I'm struggling as well.
Build your own CloudFormation. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, this is really just now go build your own way of knowing when things are working.
Every time I see something like this, I have to think that there's like one really big customer that has some horrific enterprise process where whatever's supervising the CloudFormation deploy has like a 3-minute timeout. And that's like unfixable because it runs on some old, Spark box or whatever, like some machine in a closet somewhere that cannot be moved. And as a result, they're like, we need a way to fire this off and not have to, the actual CLI or whatever process is doing it from the local machine has to stop after 3 minutes. Cause I have no idea, what the alternative is here. I don't know, if you're deploying code to a Lambda function, for example, you can use, there's a different API endpoint just to update the function code. You don't have to go through CloudFormation for it. So I don't know what service takes so long to stabilize that they decided this needed to be done like globally through CloudFormation for everybody and not just through one service. But it's something we don't fully understand.
Perhaps the team got tired of everybody saying Terraform completes it 10 times faster, and they were like, you know what? Screw that. We're gonna do it, just not correctly.
Yeah, like there's a metric somewhere that's like, we made this 10 times faster, and then there's like a tiny asterisk in the bottom of like a quarterly goals document. There's like some summary that explains that they did this.
Your mileage may vary. Please do not use in production.
I would also caution listeners as well that I was reading in the docs that it disables rollback by default.
Yeah.
What?
So be very, very careful. Or
what
at least
the hell?
That.
Why?
Yeah, well, because they no longer know that they're no longer watching for the stabilization. They don't know that they have to roll out.
What the hell is the actual point of this then?
There is one use case I can imagine where I would actually want this, but only, and I say this because there are alternatives to this, but if you've ever deployed out ECS through CloudFormation, you know that it's very painful because a lot of times logically you want the cluster definition, the service definition, the task definition, all of these things to be in the same stack so that these things are a one stack deployment, and that's it. Well, if you've ever built an image on a local machine and then you push this thing and then ECS tries to run it and goes, oh, exec error because you're running on a Mac, but you're x86 on your ECS tasks, then you know that process of failing until finally the circuit breaker kicks in, the deployment rolls back, now the entire stack rolls back. And if you have things like an RDS instance also in that stack, now you're talking about a big pain in the butt there. But that is, again, like they've already kind of solved that with the, no rollback option. And so I could see how maybe this would be a slightly better experience in the ECS world. But this definitely, I think, AJ, you kind of nailed it. Like, this feels like one big customer said, we need to have this. And since AWS builds off of customer requests, they built it, they deployed it, and now they think everyone else could potentially use it because it's more of a pain to gate this to only the one customer. And my general recommendation to our team is we can play around with this and try it, but I guarantee you we're never going to find this in a production-worthy use case.
I think I'm leaning Chris's way here. I think it's just the constant talk about CloudFormation being slow. This is just to
yeah, we'll
tick
fix
off
your
that,
little
but
red wagon.
yeah. See, it can be very quick.
And it's unfortunate because, the CloudFormation team gets hit for that. They're the ones who get blamed for it, but it's not their fault. It's not their fault that it takes 30 minutes for an RTS instance to come up. It's not their fault that it takes 10 to 15 minutes for a Lambda attached to a VPC to come up and stabilize. They can't do anything about that. And I think the CloudFormation team is probably one of the hardest jobs in all of AWS because they're the one team whose performance is not siloed to that team. They are dependent completely upon everybody else in the organization to support the CloudFormation resources, to have the proper APIs available to handle these things, to make these resources provision quickly. One of the things that AJ was saying with the micro VMs, if they just did level 4 networking connections and now you could do raw TCP, holy crap, I'm never using RDS again. Now, I don't know if that would actually work, but it would certainly be something I'd play with is how can I get Postgres running in these micro VMs? Because I want these things fast, baby. I want them fast and I want them torn down quickly because there's a lot of cases where I only need an RDS instance for, 5-10 minutes a day and that's it.
You totally could too. I don't, the options are really, really open for that. And I do think that there's like some thought to that. I don't know if they want to encourage it necessarily, but for like a dev system, for a dev box, I think it's like a really cool thing to play with when you just need a VM for a minute. It's very, very easy to push a container image, have it build, the deployable unit from that image and then start it. And it's, yeah.
Our multi-million-dollar production RDS was on a micro VM. I'm sorry, what? You did?
Yeah.
Better than being on a Kubernetes.
They still don't, it doesn't handle any kind of replication, any kind of consistency, any kind of like durability or availability or any of that. And they did that intentionally. Like you'll also notice there's not a load balancer, right? So you don't have a way, there's no orchestration. You have to kind of own that. But if you want to build the orchestration layer, it's ready for you.
And Matthew, you talked about CloudFormation now, but this is also then available for CDK as well, right?
Yeah, the CDK supports it. The CDK team, I'll say, they've been doing a great job for about the last 6 months to a year of making sure that they are right in feature parity with CloudFormation on new stuff. I've been really impressed how it used to be the CloudFormation would release some sort of change and you'd go to the CDK team and say, well, when are you going to support this? And they'd say, oh, well, we have a PR in flight and it's going to be out in a couple of weeks or something. Now it's day of, and the CDK is really getting a lot of first support love and feature parity with CloudFormation. So yeah, this is just an additional flag that you can now supply when you're doing a deploy through the CDK. I want deployment config mode is Express. And by default, it rolls back to the proper slow way of doing things.
All right, to wrap this up then, I guess the recommendation is maybe try it out, but perhaps don't use it.
Yeah, so I would say, give this a try if you need some ephemeral environments or if you need something where they were already, the resources were already deployed and available fairly quickly. This will shave a few seconds off here and there. But I wouldn't be using this for a lot of production. They even say, like, don't use this in production. And I think they know that this isn't that valuable in a production.
All right, something that I think is actually clever. Danielle, Cloudflare did something quite interesting with their CLI.
Yeah, so this one is less yelling and more, this is pretty awesome. Why don't more people copy this? So essentially, Cloudflare Wrangler is their CLI that they have in-house built to deploy anything programmatically to Cloudflare. They essentially added a -- temporary flag to their Wrangler CLI. So you could do like npm Wrangler deploy -- temporary. And essentially what that does is it will create a temporary Cloudflare account and it deploys it. And then you get a claim URL. So then you have 60 minutes, assuming you don't already have a Cloudflare account. If you're like, oh, this looks awesome, I'm just trying it out. You can go to that claim URL, sign up, it becomes your account, the resources stay in there. And the headline was really pushing, for AI agents, like many things. But I actually think this is a very great use case for agents because if you're security conscious and don't want to give Cloudflare credentials to your agent, this is a great, like, lower barrier way to enable your agent to deploy something that you can actually test, but not give it your credentials. So I think that's probably what I would use this for. I've tried it out, like quick, dry run, worked just as advertised with a simpler, just like hello world worker. And yeah, need to battle test it more with, other bindings, but pretty awesome. And yeah, I think my yells at Cloud is, why don't other people make things this seamless?
Yeah. No, I think that framing there is interesting, that it's built for agents, not for humans. That the agents are then able to deploy its own environment and it just expires unless you claim it, then I guess. I think it's a very different model, but I think it's appropriate for the time we're in right now. What do you think they're getting out of it then, Cloudflare? Will this bring in new customers?
Yeah, that's the question I had, was like kind of what it looks like from Cloudflare's end from a maintenance standpoint, because they're going to have all these, resources running and the account management on their end. As a user, it's great, but I'm guessing maybe it's just a way to get more people to sign up for Cloudflare accounts. But at the same time, I'm glad that I'm not tasked with being on the other end of having to manage and pay for all that compute that's just hanging out there.
Is this a case where you have to claim this under a new account, or can you roll it into an existing account?
What I was testing said it has to be a new account.
So this feels like just a way of artificially propping up their new account numbers then. I mean, if we're going to bring the yells at Cloud back into this, if we're going to get salty.
Growth hacking.
Growth hacking? Yeah, that feels like
this isn't Wells Fargo. What are you talking about? They wouldn't do something so nefarious.
No, but I mean, that feels like a barrier, because I don't want to sit there and spin one of these things up and then have to create a new account to use it. I may want to roll it into my existing stuff. So if there's a path for that, that's great. But otherwise, it feels like this is actually burdensome on anyone who isn't a brand new customer. Or, as you said, temporary ephemeral environment, and I just let it go away after a little.
Yeah, I think like how I would use it as someone who has a Cloudflare account would be like, don't put credentials in my account that I'm using or my environment that I'm using the agent in, have it do the temporary deploy, and then do an environment where it does have the credentials. It's all, IAC, so then it would deploy into the other account. But I do definitely agree with your point, though. It would be awesome if the claim URL could just be like, hey, move these deployed resources into like my actual account, and this is the one I want it in.
Yeah. Yeah, because especially for like enterprises, that would be absolutely necessary. And if I was starting to adopt one of these processes in these new temporary accounts, but I had no way of running it or elevating these things under my enterprise payment plan, and I had to somehow own these things, I would be frustrated. I would be a little annoyed by it and probably just look elsewhere for these things or spin my own up. But it is very, to your point, like these are some innovative things from a billing perspective that a lot of other cloud providers need to start getting on board with. I feel like Cloudflare is unique in that they can get away with these things.
The neo clouds are so good at this. Like not just Cloudflare, Vercel continually does this. I mean, Vercel built their fluid compute primitive on top of Lambda and sold it before Lambda was able to do their Lambda managed instances, right? So they gave you multi-concurrent Lambda functions first. I think it's like such a good thing for AWS to have that kind of competition because for better or for worse, big clouds are stymied by big politics. And when a smaller, more innovative customer in many cases, but also user is able to introduce a new concept that takes off like fire, it gives them a path to at least like, okay, we can also do this. We have some validation that the market's there for it, or like whatever, customers won't flee or someone will try it and those types of things. And I think that's just like genuinely a good thing in this space. Even if you, I mean, I'm fairly sure that even some of the high level engineers inside of AWS are happy when they see a Cloudflare or a Vercel or, Modal or another like AI kind of lab or small company introduce a new dimension of pricing that people are excited about because that goes straight into their doc that they had on ice for the last 6 months, right? Like that's the forcing function that I think it's a good thing. So I'm stoked to see Cloudflare do this.
Yeah, another cool thing is like students, if
Totally.
they want like low barrier to entry, you don't want to be given that scary big cloud bill. Like this did not even require me to enter credit card info or anything. Like amazing for that demographic as well.
Well, Chris, you have been building up to something.
Have I?
And that is AWS WAF.
Oh, building up is a strong
AI
word.
traffic monetization.
I mean, there's so much. It's interesting how many, I'm not going to say reactive things that we've been doing as a result of the influence of AI, but this seems to be. I don't know if this is a good one or a bad one yet. The jury's still out. I don't know what the pricing is going to be for this. I haven't looked that closely into it. But what's going on is currently, according to AWS, AI traffic, AI crawler traffic is now up to 50%, maybe more, of all internet traffic total. And what that means, especially for people like me, content creators, people that get revenue from clicks, is we're not getting that money. The click-through rates are dropping, the CPCs, CPMs, they're all cratering. And I don't know if this is, I understand the rationalization behind it, but I don't know who this is for, other than once I see the pricing, maybe I'll understand that it's okay. This is just for AWS's coffers. What they're doing is AWS WAF has now shipped an AI traffic monetization feature, which allows you to publishers, people that are creating content, to charge AI bots per request instead of just blocking them, which by and large they ignore anyway. When the bot hits protected content, the WAF returns a 402 payment required. It currently uses stablecoin via Coinbase, but it's going to then start including Stripe verification, Stripe integration, and it classifies the bots in a bunch of different ways. You've got GPT bot, Claude Web. You can do verified and unverified tiers, what to do with them, and have like reactive actions based upon that. So if you want Perplexity to be able to scrape your site, but only for a certain price, you can basically set all that stuff up. This can potentially be a good thing for content creators that have been losing money because AI bots are not feeding back from click-throughs. It will be a different revenue stream than regular ad revenue. But again, I have not implemented yet. I don't know how much of their pound of flesh AWS is going to take off the back end of it. They are now basically playing traffic cop or traffic controller to allow folks to access or not access, or well, not folks, but AI agents to access or not access. So I don't know if this is actually going to give publishers more leverage and more justification, or what's going to happen with it. It literally just came out less than 2-3 weeks ago, so I have not seen any deployments of it in the wild yet. But it's still early. So what are everybody else's thoughts on this? Does anybody else have like websites that have lost revenue? What have you guys been thinking about this?
Too little, too late. This should have been done 3 years ago.
Even
Agreed.
before, like when the base of the models were out. I mean, it's such a cool idea, and I think, like, I do think there's like a bunch of value in specific like bloggers and independent journalists, like Substack folks, that they can kind of capture some of that back, some of that revenue back that was like ad sales. But for the link aggregators and all this, it's far too far gone. I don't think that content is deep in those models. It's never coming out. It just doesn't matter. I still see a lot of like onesie twosie traffic from bots on my blog, but I think because it hasn't changed, like a lot of my content is static and it's just like AWS instructional stuff. Doesn't have to get updated, so they don't, why waste the time? I think post training has really come a long way, and I don't think like the web stuff is not necessarily done in training anymore, as much as it is done in like for web access to look something up, right? In the same way, you want to look at a pricing model for Lambda MicroVMs, for example, because you're about to go on a podcast and talk about it. The AI will just fetch it live. Yeah, for a totally normal thing that you all do every day. That's kind of I think the change of stuff. So, cool.
And I see this price point actually, being just pushed up the chain. Like Perplexity is not going to eat the cost of this. They're going to pass that on to their subscribers. So it's another shell game, I feel.
Yeah, I feel like I'm wondering how this overlaps with Amazon Bedrock agent core payments. So if I enable that, put a WAF on, enable this on the WAF, does it get charged twice? I don't know. Got to find out.
I think what you said is interesting, AJ, as well, that many times it is the actual agent that you're using that is fetching information, and that traffic must be very high these days, because it feels like my agents are doing that all the time.
Yeah, and keep in mind that for a lot of people, that's coming from a residential IP. It will be very, very, very hard to build. The same thing that makes like CloudBot or Hermes work great on a Mac Mini that doesn't work well inside of AWS VM is that it looks like your traffic from your house. So it sails through every kind of bot detection, we could do a whole 90 minutes on how modern bot detection systems work, but your residential IP is so well fingerprinted to you that it's used for advertiser sales and decisions. Like when you see, someone opens Instagram and they're connected to your Wi-Fi, like y'all are going to get things that you talked about that day because that person was talking about that already and you showed up to their house, you open the app, they know that you're connected to that Wi-Fi, bam, you're tied together and you're tied for life. And like those things all factor into your internet reputation, which goes the other direction in the case of the AI bots on my laptop. Like they have the same reputation as me. It's like, unless you're an AWS C-score viewer, it's sterling. so everyone, like the ability for some WAF to figure out that it's not a user and in fact an AI bot will be very, very hard for when your local Claude code is doing anything. Everything else about cloud agents, I think, is going to go a different direction. But the internet is extremely mature in this respect. And it's very, millions of dollars in payroll goes out to fingerprint what you're looking at with your eyeballs. And I think that goes a little bit in service of what an AI agent can crawl for you in an anonymous way or in a way that masquerades as you and not an AI bot. So wild world out there.
That explains why I get all those weird ads when I'm over at Bonnick's house on my phone. I did not put two and two together.
Yeah, they know. They're like, this guy is on the weird
it's
train.
Bonnick? Oh, he's a freak. Here, just give him this.
They sorted you into that bucket.
I'll often throw my hotspot on in public places just to mess with people so that they get screwed over on all their ads for Transformers.
This is the mad
G.I.
genius
Joes.
I came here for. This is exactly the mad genius I came here for.
So many leather shops. It's weird. All right.
It's not unwelcome, just a little weird.
No. At my house it's different.
Yeah, you're all latex at your shop.
Yeah, exactly. Giant drums of never mind. Okay, moving on.
So AWS is monetizing the AI economy at the edge now with that, but apparently these hyperscalers are also now willing to send thousands of engineers to your office, basically, to build your AI apps for you. So this is a topic that I find interesting. Recently, Microsoft dropped $2.5 billion to spin up a 6,000-person subsidiary that they're calling Frontier Co. And AWS countered by, I think it was something like a billion or a couple of billion of dollars with their forward deployed engineering program, a new org within AWS. So what that means is that these hyperscalers are now sending their own engineers to sit in customer offices and build the apps. And this is something new. Sure, they've had, like AWS has had ProServe before, but this is something more than that. I think that traditional hyperscaler model now is kind of, we build a primitive, you figure out how to snap it together, but that model has broken down now with this. The uncomfortable part of this is that many of these AI tools and the things you need to use to build AI kind of require hyperscalers today to send a bunch of engineers to client offices to get it working. And if that's the case, I don't think they really have a platform. That's more of a consulting gig at that point. So I think this shows that maybe AI adoption in these large enterprises isn't really going as fast as AWS and Microsoft and the others want it to.
I think so. ProServe this is just the next step in ProServe type work, right? But the problem that I've always seen with professional services work is that you've got these people that'll come in to an organization, try to become the technical experts and work with SMEs to implement some sort of functionalities, write some code that organization can't write themselves. And then they leave. And that organization is now responsible and has to maintain that code long term. And they didn't have the expertise in the first place to do it. So why do we think that they're going to be able to maintain in the long term? So either those contracts continue on and on and on and on for a long time, which organizations like AWS and Microsoft, they don't want that type of work, because you are then just a warm body and you're just augmenting an existing development shop. Like the power of these things is to be able to come in, do a high impact feature development, and then leave. And if you don't leave, then you start losing your margins over time. Now, and you lose your engineers. Engineers get bored with that and they move on and they do other things. But there's also, it feels like an inherent conflict of interest here too. Because if they're going to go in and they're going to implement these AI things, and they are doing this on behalf of Microsoft or Azure or AWS or whoever, then it is going to behoove them to make the most token inefficient AI agent that they can. And then how do you back away from that? Like, I think a lot of why companies aren't adopting AI at the rate that these hyperscalers want is because A, it's very tough, but B, there's no way to know how effective these things are. And we've been seeing a lot of this floating around for the last 3 months or so of companies who are going, oh, we just dumped a whole ton of money into AI. And we don't really know if we have anything to show for it. And now I think these big hyperscalers who are heavily invested CapEx-wise on all these programs are going, we got to fix this. We got to get people working these things and using them well and continue their token usage up and continue their spend up, because if they don't, we're all going to collapse. So they're going to throw these billion-dollar programs at these things, but it doesn't really solve the problem, which is this isn't a technical problem. This is AI was oversold. And we're seeing now that people are starting to realize, oh, AI can't fix everything, and it certainly can't do it at these magical numbers where we're spending a tenth to get the same productivity out of a person. We now know they've been trying it for a year and it's not getting us anywhere. And now they're panicking. This feels like a panic. And maybe I'm just salty because I'm seeing a lot of people I know get laid off because of AI. It was supposed to take their jobs, and it did. And now suddenly they've got nothing to go to unless they can somehow pass a magic AI HR bot to get hired somewhere. And that's a horrible experience. And the whole thing has just really made this industry a lot of unfun. from a corporate standpoint, I love the stuff that I can build with AI on a day-to-day basis. But at work, it's incredibly frustrating when I'm sitting there and I'm working with clients and I'm talking to their AI bots and explaining to their AI bots why what they're asking for is not the simple thing the AI bot is saying. And then their response is always like, well, this is what the AI tells me. And, this is supposed to be easy. So there's my rant. There's my yelling at the clouds. So like, oh.
I saw a post on LinkedIn just the other day. Someone was defending FDs and basically said that, well, this is different than consulting because this is everything from ideation to production. And I think that's worse, honestly. If you need to bring someone in to come up with the idea what to use AI for, to then build with AI and then deploy it into production, yeah, you're not really solving a problem. You're creating a problem for yourself and you're paying for it. And then you end up paying for the tokens as well, like you said, Matthew.
So they really are on Accenture. I'm sorry, never mind.
That's what I'm saying. Billions of dollars of OpEx plowed into getting engineers to talk to their customers for the first time, and it's all done. And the idea is all being borrowed from your McKinseys and your Bains and your BCGs and so on. It's beautiful, beautiful capitalism at work. You got to just embrace this one, Matthew. I'm going to give you the L here.
That's fair. And I could be very wrong about this. I'm just really salty on it right now because it just feels like every time I turn around, there's another thing happening that's going, that's not going to pan out. And everyone just put $500 billion into figuring that out.
So I don't think you're wrong, Matthew. I'm actually on record saying that at least once now. And the problem that I have with this, aside from Gunnar's point and Matthew's point, is and AJ alluded to this a little bit, was these people are getting paid to figure out how to increase your bill with that customer. I wouldn't trust somebody walking in my front door that said, "Hey, I'm from Azure, I'm from AWS, and I'm here to make your life easier by creating an AI bot to help you spend more money with us." They don't say that last part out loud, but that's exactly what I'm thinking. It's the reason why I always go third party with ProServe to begin with, because a different company isn't going to say, "Oh, well, you need multiple RDS instances and you need them to be this size." They'll say, "You can get away with a little bit smaller, and here's an ECS instead of EKS." So that's an entire other different conversation. So yeah, I don't like that process and them dumping all of that money into it for all of those reasons. And I don't have a solution or a fix for it otherwise. So I don't have a silver lining for the end of that one. Sorry.
Hire them. Don't hire them. Let them waste that $2 billion or something. It's just added to the pile of wasted money. I saw something the other day, and I don't know if it's true, but something like the amount.
That's a way to. I saw something the other day. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but
it sounds legit. It sounds legit. So I'll let AI tell me if I'm wrong. That if you think about back in the 2008 collapse and all of the money that was put into all of these different housing market financial devices, we're 2x that now on AI investments. And at least housing has an underlying value behind it. What happens when, all of a sudden we don't have a use for all of those NVIDIA chips that they've been all buying up like crazy for the last 3 years? What do we do with those things? Are they reusable anywhere else? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that'll go. I think it's going to be used. It's crazy. I do think we're overbuilding inference, and I know we're spending a lot of time on this topic, but it'll go. I think the demand is insane. The leaked financials from all these AI labs is indicating that inference is actually a wildly popular and profitable industry. So there's margin to go down if you're like a reseller, and that's introducing base 10 and all these other competitors that are providers that are hosting like open weight models. I think it's like a ton of room for capacity there. So even if like a lab doesn't eat them up or something like a big lab implodes, they'll be used for sure. It's wild, but I think it's true.
Well, that also means that people have to start paying the actual price of tokens as well. But I think we'll get to that.
Oh, yeah, very soon.
All right. I think we'll know the answer to that question, I guess, in a year or two, see if these FDEs are still around or if it gets absorbed back into something else. So
we can look back at this recording and say, see, we were right. I love that.
We were right, I'm sure. So I think we're going to pause here. And then when we come back, we're going to have burst mode. All right, we are back and it's time for burst mode. Each of us brought one thing we noticed. It's not a deep dive, people, just something that caught your eye. Quicker pace. And Danielle, you're up first.
So much pressure. Yeah, so the thing that I wanted to bring up was there's an announcement post about Anthropic Claude Sonnet 5 available on Amazon Bedrock. And two interesting things about this. I think in the past, like it would say generally available. The wording on this just says is now available. But I will say from my personal experience on my personal AWS account, I had tried to use it and I got a access denied warning. And then it asked me to contact AWS sales in order to use this model. Not sure what available means. So yeah, just curious if anyone else had that experience.
Well, first off, the wording is interesting because we've had a lot of those instances recently where they posted that something is generally available. It's not really generally available, though.
Generally, it is.
In US East 1.
For some. Yeah.
And with people with better C scores than AJ.
Yeah, I mean, that's a given, though.
Welcome to the permanent underclass.
Yeah, maybe I've been talking to AJ too much. I don't know.
We shouldn't have connected to the same access point at reInvent, Danielle. Now they added us to the same high-risk cohort.
No.
It could be, yeah, who knows? Blame AJ.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The entire thing with rolling out these models, I guess you have to be an enterprise to start using them on day one. Matthew, you're up next.
Yeah, so AWS changed the IAM Identity Center, so now there's like programmatic access that you can do through things, which I think this may open it up for someone to actually create a better version of the UI console and make something that's, not set 20 years in the past and, consistent and functional and nice. But we'll see. I still think IAM Identity Center is probably the best way to go when it comes to access to AWS, and certainly programmatic access is a nice additional feature there. So I'm looking forward to seeing what people create with that. We're going to look at it internally at my company to see if we can't start creating some interesting tooling around that sort of thing.
I guess the question is why did it take so long to get there, right?
Like a lot of things with IAM Identity Center, I think a lot of the times it's why did it take so long? But it's so core to your access, they probably have to be incredibly careful about how they change and maintain that software, because you're going to absolutely kill everyone's access if you get one bug out there.
All right, AJ, back to tokens.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a new report, according to the information, that Anthropic and AWS are experiencing a rift as they renegotiate their next contract. Quoting the information specifically, it says the change could significantly increase Amazon's cost. Today, Amazon is paying for the number of hours of compute they use from Anthropic, and it sounds like they're next going to be paying based on tokens, which is what basically everybody else pays. This is the first I've heard about. I mean, AWS and Anthropic have had a special relationship. A lot of Anthropic runs on top of AWS, so I can see why they probably have like a very, very special deal. Tokens per second is how, as far as I know, Anthropic does all of their like big enterprise deals. And in fact, like even if you're a startup and I think the limit's like 5 seats or 6 seats, like you get off of the like Claude Max plans. So I think when everyone read this report, there's a paywall on the information. So unless you pay for it, you probably couldn't read it. And then it got posted and tweeted. And I think a lot of people were reading that Amazon internally was somehow being allowed to use like Claude Max plans for their developers. I don't think that was the case. I think they were basically paying for the underlying compute that they were using from Anthropic, and now they are going to switch. Broadly, though, there is obviously a theme. The Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, had a viral tweet that talked about using open weight models and how they're like increasing by an order of magnitude their amount of tokens spent and decreasing by an order of magnitude the amount of money they're spending because they switched over to these like open weight models. There are lots of AI gateways that are starting out there now where they're going to use a scoring or ranking algorithm to determine where to route your request. So if you ask it to like change the color of a button, it's going to go and switch it to a cheaper model versus if you ask it like some deep thinking task. I think this is going to become part and parcel for using model inference in the next year. I think it'll be super common to have open weight models that are as good or close to as good as like a much earlier version. I did use GLM 5.2 for a while in the last couple of weeks, and I think it's really, really good. Like a joke, had a friend try it out on my laptop and see, and they couldn't tell if it was Opus or 5.2. They're really quite good. So I do think this is what we're going to see a lot more of coming forward, which I think is just a cool part of the cycle.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to see also what happens with a lot of the tooling, like Kiro, for instance. Obviously, you have been able to pick some models, but it's heavily been leaning towards Claude.
You may have. I don't think I've ever tried Kiro.
I was talking about people in general. The ones generally available people, that kind of people.
Not my account.
No.
Yeah, I think you can use Claude Sonnet 5 on Kiro. I've noticed that. Anyway.
Special relationship,
Yeah.
She has a high C
All right. Chris, we hinted at some booing before.
Yes.
Set the scene for us.
So I was at the I go to a lot of summits, obviously. I was at the AWS DC Summit, and it was interesting because it was something that I hadn't experienced before. I've heard anecdotally of people, protesting or jumping up in the audience and, quietly being hustled out of the side of different keynote speakers and presenters. At the AWS DC Summit in the heart of DC at the Javits Center, the Chris Wright, the U.S. Secretary of Energy, was David Levy's guest speaker. So Dave came on, he talked about AI and security and government and all of the things that he was supposed to talk about. And then the Secretary of Energy came up on stage and was resoundingly, roundly booed. And if you Google this, you'll see like news clips about how he was booed when he came on stage. What those news clips didn't follow along with, and I was in the audience, was the general scoffing of like the assertions that Chris was making. And I don't know if these were like politically motivated or what their angle was in regards to that. But when he said things like along the lines of building AI data centers is not going to be materially impactful on our energy consumption or water consumption, it was like everybody was just calling BS in the crowds. Everybody was like, bullshit. It was, there was, I don't think anybody's buying this. I don't think there's a lot of folks in the general populace. And this was DC. I don't know if people are supposed to be extra spicy in DC or if they're supposed to be extra flexible, malleable or whatever. But like to hear that was interesting. I will admit I'm also in the camp that I think that adding, 30 to 40 kilowatt per hour racks for a data center with 6,000 racks is going to be materially impactful no matter where the hell you put it, much less in the middle of outer space or whatever absurd notion they have about that. But it was interesting to see how many people were like, at an AWS summit, people who are like, they've drunk the Kool-Aid, they believe in cloud, they are techno nerds through and through, and they are not having it with AI data centers. So, or at least the suppositions of the Secretary of Energy Secretary, that guy, making assertions. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that AI is good for the planet argument.
Yes,
is quite a hard sell right now.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. I get to round off burst mode, and I want to talk about a paper that I think everyone that's shipping multi-agent systems right now should read. So Apple and Stanford researchers, they put LLM agents into teams and gave them classic coordination tasks. And they then asked whether the team beat its smartest member, and the teams didn't, which is super interesting. So what was clear is that it's been quite common now to use experts basically within. So you have different agents, multi-agents, and some are experts at certain things. And what was clear from this research is that the experts weren't really doing better. It's kind of the compromise tax. And teams don't ignore the expert. They average the expert's answer with everyone else's. So it's not disagreement, it's delusion. So these agents would rather be agreeable than correct, which is super interesting. So they tried labeling the expert explicitly in the prompt, aggressively optimized prompts, still underperformed by from 6 to 41%. So identification of what agent is an expert isn't a bottleneck either. And what I find quite strange as well is that same consensus seeking that kills the expertise also makes these teams robust to sabotage. So when they added in a bad actor to the team, it barely mattered at all. So it's one knob that controls all of this. So I find this super interesting. I've been building quite a lot of these multi-agent solutions recently, and this kind of changes a lot of things. So this is a paper that I recommend everyone to read.
I mean, it's something like you say, humans figured this out decades ago. The larger the group of people trying to make the decision, death by consensus. It's a phrase in business that the more people you add to making a decision, the worse that decision comes out to be.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you can apply it to AI too, though. It makes sense.
Maybe multi-agent systems is just another thing to get people to adopt AI, maybe.
Or burn tokens.
Yeah. All right, people. That is episode 1 of Yells at Cloud. We made it. So if you want to yell at us, you should then go to yells@cloudpod.com. You can obviously subscribe wherever you get your podcast. You should tell a coworker who has opinions about cloud and know where to put them.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Smash that like button.
Smash that subscribe button.